Good evening. Tonight's session, Subaru tuning, nothing else. So anything Subaru related, tuning, what mods work, what mods don't work, what mods are a waste of money, anything about self-tuning. If you're interested in self-tuning, I'll talk a little bit about the academy that I run as well on here if you're interested in self-tuning. But this session is for you. So if you've got a question, which is all that tonight's session is, I've got no pre-prepared information to go through. If you've got a question, put a Q at the beginning of it, pop it in the live chat, and I will do my very best to answer it as best I can. As I say, the sessions are for you. It's not for me showing off as to what I know or what I don't know. It's trying to give you as much information as I can possibly give you. I don't gatekeep any information. I don't keep things secret. So if you've got a question, ask it. I will tell you my honest opinion or a factual answer if I know it. Just to give you a bit of time to sort of write questions, because there's a bit of a lag in you typing anything in there and it actually showing up on my screen. But if you don't know me, I'm Duncan. I map Subarus every day of the week, pretty much. Or I'm talking about Subarus, or I'm messing around with Subarus. Been doing it full time for 18 years here in the UK. Because I'm in the UK, Subaru effectively gave up on the UK in 2018 with the final edition VA version. So we don't get an awful lot of the newer FA engine cars. So if you've got questions about that, I'll do my best to answer it, but EJ engine cars are where my experience is predominantly. So standard ECU, Link, Civex, other ECUs, modifications, track prep, anything along those lines. To give you an idea on upcoming videos that I've got going on, apologies for the kind of clickbaity title on the Forester SDI engine. It rattled once on a cold startup. It's good to drive around, but it's not going to get any better. So the engine's coming out. I was planning on doing that anyway. It's just brought it slightly further forward. But obviously I introduced the SH Forester to you as the new daily driver. That's coming up with me to the dyno tomorrow, and it may well go on there for a little map for UK fuel. So I'll obviously video that, and that will be hopefully released at the weekend. I'm also still working on the 15-part sort of ultimate guide to self-tuning your car. It's actually going to be a few more episodes than that, but that's still coming on. And when I've got a few episodes filmed and edited, I'll release them sort of almost simultaneously. And live streams, are going to try and do these every Wednesday. Doesn't always work, because if I'm sort of a long distance away mapping, then sometimes I can't get back in time to do it. But I'm going to try and do some live streams with some guests as well. So it's not just me blabbing on for an hour. You've got other people to listen to. So hopefully they'll be informative and entertaining. So anyway, that's it. Questions and answers. Talk to me. Any questions? So yeah, we've got a few of the guys on here. Kev, Fred, Manuel, Jan. Obviously a new member in the academy, Josh Briel, I think that's pronounced. Yeah, so any questions, far away. Just give you a brief outline on the Forester, on the new Forester SH JDM version. So it comes with 230 horsepower. We'll find out how real that is on UK fuel, but it comes with that from the factory. It's a manual version in a very, I think it's a bit boring, the blue, but some people like it. It's growing on me. But yes, I'm not going to modify it. it will be modified. Yeah, I've already ordered a couple of bits for it, so that's going to happen. So tuning wise, right, okay, Jamie, right, 330,000 blob eyes, rattled a couple of times on cold start, top oil and good since. Am I doomed to? The view that I took with the Forester was it rattled, and it was definite bottom end rattle. I know the sound. It isn't going to get any better, and I'd rather pull the engine while there was still, while the sump was still usable, and while there's a good chance I could clean the modine out, rather than waiting for it to go spectacularly, at which point you're throwing an awful lot of things away. As it is, I could just put bearings in there and redo it. I am going to put a whole new short block in there, an RA short block. Having said that, we had a Forester SG that it rattled on cold start every time you started it on cold, and it did 9 years like that. Rattled every time, good as gold, got thrashed around, and it still runs, and the engine still runs fine. It's just the rest of the car has rusted away around it. It's not going to get any better, Jamie. I would say save up and get a new short block in there, or buy another second-hand engine. But a second-hand engine is a risk. Right, do I still do any tuning at Whiff Bits? Sometimes. We hadn't been able to arrange anything recently down there, and yeah, that's just the way it is at the moment. They're using their dyno for a lot of Yaris GR tuning, so they didn't have the space available the last couple of times that I asked. I'm not going to answer questions on other tuners as to whether they're any good or not. Sorry. Don't want to get involved in bitch fests or anything like that. Right. Yeah, right. Difference between 3-port and a 4-port on an external wastegate, and recommend a good 4-port. I could be really facetious and say the difference is 1. But the 4-port, because you got the push me pull me on the wastegate pressure, you get potentially a lot more boost for a much lower duty cycle on the wastegate. So typically on mine, running 2.4 bar of boost, I was at about 25% wastegate duty just to hold that pressure, that boost. So wastegate duty tables would be much lower. The turbodynamic side of things would be much lower, because like 0.5% or 1% difference in the duty can make a lot of difference on the boost. But a 4-port is the way to go. It really holds boost properly, and once you get it sort of dialed in for the wastegate control, it's perfect. Right. Right, hello. Question: EJ255 with a VF30 at 1.1 bar, 3-port sports cat. Small issue with boost creep. Right. So that was small issue with boost creep. Can it be tuned out? Kind of define what boost creep is. Is the boost going up, or is the boost coming down? Because they can both be defined as boost creep. It's just kind of like boost doing what it wants to do without you controlling it. I'm guessing that you're saying that the boost is going up. Can it be tuned out? You could bring the wastegate duty down to kind of stop it sort of boosting quite so much. But if the wastegate duty is already at the lowest part, The only way to reduce that is to take the turbo off and port around the wastegate hole, just to let the air sort of bleed out of it a lot better. Depends what the map's looking like. Right, would your Forester be down on power now, or is it just a noise at this point? It was just that one cold start. It was a nasty noise, and I just drove it out of the garage, and it's on the ramp now, waiting for me to find a couple of hours to take the engine out. I don't know whether it's down on power. It seems to run fine, but I just didn't want to wreck it completely because it makes a fucking awful mess, excuse my language. When you do a bottom end, you're throwing so many bits away that if you can avoid it sort of throwing a rod through the top of the block, which you can do if it spectacularly goes, because like the water crossflow pipe is normally the thing that gets sacrificed as well as the block, and it's not good to do that. So as soon as I heard the noise, it's not going to get driven. Drove it to the garage, and it's on the ramp ready to have the engine taken out, which is probably my job for Saturday morning. Good question on spark plugs. Right, if it's a 2 litre UK 2 litre or normal 2 litre, the PFR 7B, NGK PFR 7B plugs. If it's JDM Twin Scroll Legacy, then it's ILFR 6Bs. If it's a 2.5, then the ILFR 6Bs are the right plugs. But I have had 2 sets of plugs recently go in about 50 miles, just cracks down the electrodes. I don't know whether it's the supplier issue or a parts issue, like a quality control from the manufacturers, but it's quite annoying, particularly when both of those were the rear cylinders on Legacy Twin Scroll and the rear cylinder on my Forester SH, which had brand new plugs in the other day, and one of them failed today, because the plugs at the back are right pain in the backside to get out. But NGK PFR 6Bs for 2 litre, NGK ILFR 6Bs or 7H if you're going up in the power, would be the right plugs for that. Yeah, it's very similar sort of thing. Yeah, so hot misfire, both plugs, passenger side. Yeah, if they're NGK PFRs or ILFR 6Bs, then it could be related to that. I've had lots of issues with those recently, but I don't like any other plugs, so it's just kind of one of those things. Exhaust, when do you normally see a 3-inch as a restriction? It's difficult to say really. I've managed 850 on a 3-inch exhaust, and I haven't found an engine beyond that that's capable of more than that really reliably. So it might be on those cars that it would make more power with a 4-inch exhaust, but it's really difficult to get a 4-inch exhaust in a Subaru tunnel. So 3 inches was perfectly fine for Gary's 760 horsepower, for Ed's 830, for mine at 790 plus the nitrous. I haven't seen 3 inches of restriction. Right, I'm just taking these randomly. Right, I've adjusted values in white along the edge and attempt to put the values our data log in range. Can adjusting some tables have effects on others? Yes. When you're adjusting the math table in particular, because the loadings, or because the load is calculated from the math grams per second, if you're putting up the math values, then it will increase the load, so it would add less ignition timing, theoretically add more fuel. If you're reducing the math values, then it would reduce the engine load, and it would add more ignition timing because it's in a different column in the ignition table, and it would add less fuel. So you always have to be really careful bringing the math values down. But yeah, that's generally the two things that are kind of interlinked. Oh gosh, right. Right, cam sync between cam and crank when I hit around 4,000. The link ECU is registering 18,000 RPM and status. Would it be a sensor or stretch belt as overdue? It wouldn't be a stretch belt. If that's doing that, I would say is most likely to be the crank sensor, because it gets the most abuse and the most heat. What you find with some of the old sensors, and particularly some of the old pulleys, there might be a bit of debris or whatever on the pulley, or a little burr on one of the teeth on there. It would just give it a false reading. So first point would be to change the sensor, because it's quite easy to borrow a crank sensor from someone just to test before you buy a new one. And the same with the cam sensor, they're easy to change. 5-minute job for each of those. If the belt is stretched to a point where it's making a change to the RPM readings, then the engine would have been dead already. So I would absolutely say it isn't that. It's cam sensor or crank sensor. Probably crank sensor is where I would start. Grant, get your block out on Saturday. Yeah. Right. Okay, before I come for a tune with you then, I'm not saying Martin Engine Tuner isn't good. I'm not saying anyone isn't good, or anyone is bad. It's just, it's not my point, my position to be slagging off or bigging up other tuners. I run my business for me and do the best job that I can for my customers. If you want to use me for mapping, great. If you want to use someone else, then fine. Right, so if you come for a tune with me, which hopefully you will, any recommended mods for an EJ20X running 8.5 to 1 hybrid VF38, looking at 280 to 300. Okay, have you put is this in a legacy? I'm guessing it is. Yeah, 340 fuel pumps. I've had some issues with the 340 fuel pumps, whether they be RCM ones, Fuji or Scooby Works or Deutsch Works. The 340s tend to be less reliable than the 255s in my experience. Lots of issues with 340s dying very quickly, whereas the 255s tend to last 3, 4, 5 years before they start to weaken. The 340s, in my experience, are not lasting that long. So if you haven't already put a 340 in there, I'd probably say don't. Just either keep the standard one if the standard pump is fine, or the 255, which I think is a much more reliable. Any recommendations? No, it should do that sort of power on good fuel. Yeah, hybrid 38, even a standard 38 will do that sort of power. The biggest issue on a legacy is the intercooler being quite small. So if you can get air cooling of better air cooling, either a front mount or a bigger intercooler on the top of that, then it will work better. Yeah, they are an absolute nightmare. Yeah, it was number 3 plug today that was the faulty one. Yeah, in the Imprezas it's easier to get the rear coil packs and plugs out, but on the Forester, because the engine sits down about an inch, it's really difficult to get on them. And on the SH it sits down even further and is a right pain in the arse. I wasn't enjoying that today. Get rid of modine, yay or nay? I have got rid of them in the past. The Spec C doesn't have a modine, it just has a separate oil cooler. If you have a bottom end failure, then they're really expensive. Modines are a new one, and if you got a proper bottom end failure, it's impossible to clean them out. So at that point, either do the modine, because all the modine is doing is they call it an oil cooler, but all it's actually doing is equalising the coolant temperature with the oil temperature, because the coolant goes around the core which holds the oil, and so it warms the oil up quicker, which is better for the engine, better for economy, but it also transfers some of the heat from the oil into the coolant, so you're using the radiator as a kind of an oil cooler, but it doesn't really work very well at that. So if oil cooling is what you're after, then fit an oil cooler. The modine, in my eyes, it just helps warm the oil. Right. Right, back to plugs. Yeah. Right, let's go on, getting loads of questions tonight. Right, see my butterfly valve that's connected to the wastegate arm. It rattles and gives me annoying tick. Is that fixable or need a new turbo? Depends on whether your wastegate arm is adjustable. Some of them are fixed length. If it's adjustable and have a little lock nut on there, you'll need to take the C-clip off the arm, lift it off the flap, and wind it in a couple of turns, just so you've got essentially half a hole obscured by the post, so that you have to pull it onto the arm. That will give you preload on the wastegate penny, so it will stop it rattling. It will also affect the boost, so if you you will need to get your map checked by your tuner, or change it yourself. If it's a fixed length arm, i.e. there's no adjusting on there, what you can sometimes do is undo the two 10mm bolts that hold the wastegate mechanism, and just space between that and the actual turbo frame, so that it pulls a little bit more tension on that bar. Is my old Race Hawkeye alive, or did it die? I saw it the other day, still under the cover, at a tuning garage, waiting for the new owner to build it back up. It is still alive. All the bits out of it were organ donors for other vehicles, but the shell is still there, and still going to get built up again. It will at some point see the light of day, I'm sure. Right, let me come back to that one. Yeah, you can change the filtering level. If you're on Link ECU, you can change the filtering level for the cam and the crank sensor, which might clean up the signal and might clean up some of the RPM traces. But in my view, once they've started going, they'll degrade, and you're better off with a new sensor. I'd always keep a spare crank sensor anyway, because they do go. I'm not going there, Chris. Right. Yeah. Yeah, so part of my old race car is now in Sweden, waiting to go into Jan's car here. So yeah, the engine is in Ed's, the gearbox I think is down in Bristol, and running gear is somewhere else, and tyres and wheels and everything else. Didn't manage to go to Subaru Portugal meetup this year. I'm hoping that I'll be over there later in the year and meet up with some of the guys. But it was an awesome day out. The day out last year, it's not like a car meet in the UK where everyone's parked up with the bonnets up. They were, parked up, bonnets down, set up a sprint circuit, all went round there, even in completely standard cars, and trying to donut around the cone. A few guys were absolutely immense at it. And then they went off and we all did a hill climb. Yeah, amazing. Big lunch, big evening meal, and everyone was really friendly and welcoming. And the roads there are absolutely spectacular. 20 miles of mountain passes, hairpin, sweeping corners, views for 100 million miles, or it felt like it. And yeah, no traffic, no speed cameras. It was beautiful. Right. Do you happen to know what size bung to block off the recirc valve pipe on a 2017 STI? I don't know the exact size, but a cam follower fits in the hole and blanks it off perfectly. So if you know the size of the cam followers, then it's that size. Right. Okay, so yeah, it's in a Legacy GT, used an RCM 340 as old, standard pump had failed, fuel filter blocked. Yeah, any upgrades needed for boost solenoid? A 3-port boost solenoid would probably be a good idea, but it's not essential. You should be able to make enough boost to make the sort of power that you're after anyway, but it's never going to be a bad plan. Fuel regulator, no, standard one's absolutely fine. If you're doing an aftermarket fuel regulator, you've got to do proper lines, and then it just adds to a stupid amount of money, and it doesn't need it. Right. Ooh. Okay, just rebuilt my engine on Subaru Exige, runs at 20V, small ticking under idle and a whine when under load. All seals replaced. This has the ABCS and dual vent. Any ideas? Depends where the ticking's coming from. If it's from the heads, then it's more likely just valve clearances. It could be that they've set them on the slightly loose side. Did you build it yourself, or was it built for you? Whine under load could be gearbox. You've obviously got auto box in that, so probably diff related. But it's difficult to say on that. Oh, yeah, nice question. Right, Turbo Conundrum. Looking to buy a new one for Hatch STI. What's your experience with the Fastline GTX 2971R or Fastline GTX 3071R Gen 2? 2971, I think, wins that one. I think it's a lovely turbo. Mid fours on a Hatch STI is great in my opinion. Good mix of spool up and top end power. Will give you a good amount of torque as well. Right. Right, injector angle. It depends on the ECU as to how they're calculating that. Depends on the engine. I think on I'm trying to remember what it was set at on my Cyvex. I think it was set at 540. Off the top of my head, running on 272 cams. Pretty sure it was 540. Yeah, it'd be worth it. The guys over there are incredible, and it's a beautiful country. All right. Right, Daysan. Hi Duncan, my Forester XT06 is having this ticking sound throughout the RPM range. It's coming mostly from bank 2 side, just below the valve cover, or from inside it. What could be the cause? The Forester XT06, I think you've got the dark blue injectors on those. They're quite noisy. It might be a couple of noisy injectors, or it could be valve clearances. Be easy enough-ish to take the cam covers off and check the valve clearances. Can be done with the engine in the car. Obviously you're going to make a mess with oil and it'd be a nightmare to try and reseal the cam cover, but it's most likely going to be cam clearances. Oh, keeps moving. Right, thank you. My pleasure. I enjoy them. I hope other people do. Yeah, the trigger arming voltage is 3.5, but there's also a filter, so you can put a kind of a filter on there. I think it goes from 0 to 5. They experiment with different filters. Okay, on GC8, right. Yeah, I'd probably check the pulley, see whether it's been dropped and whether the teeth are slightly burred. Yeah, maybe change to a black crank sensor rather than a brown one. They do work slightly differently. Right, how are we doing for time? Right, yeah, cool. Impressor running 300 horsepower with pops and bangs on a switch. What damage will I be doing long term? Rarely gets used, probably a handful of times a month, no more than 30 seconds at a time. All that's going on there is the explosion, rather than happening through the cylinder and then pushing the piston down and blah blah blah. It's going on while the valves are opening, so it's coming out through the headers, through the turbo, past a couple of sensors. So the damage that you could do is to the headers, to the sensors that are in the headers, to the turbo. Pops and bangs can create a little bit of a shock loading on the turbo bearings, so it can take a little bit of life out of it. But that's essentially it. Sometimes maybe take a little bit of life out of the valve seats, but anything good or fun has a downside. So yeah, 30 seconds at a time, I wouldn't necessarily worry about that. I melted a set of headers using it for a lot longer than that, which was silly but fun. Right, 3 litre R 5 EAT automatic. They're supposed to take quite a bit more than the 4 EATs. Depends what sort of power you're aiming for. They're supposed to take around the 400 mark. If he's wanting it to be reliable, then keep it at standard horsepower, but it's just how close to the guesses of how much power they take as you want to go as to take a risk. I've run them over 400 with a supercharger on it, but it's different. Horsepower limits on components, gearboxes in particular, are vague. People break Subaru gearboxes with standard power. Bug-eyed WRX gearbox, broken at 220 horsepower, but I've got customers running over 500 on them. Now, work that out. It's just how much of a risk you want to take. Right. I would, rebuilt yourself, all valves and clearances and marked and put back in order. Did you gap them with a feeler gauge? Because if the heads are skimmed, there might have been sort of some changes in various components in there. But it's always best to measure them with a feeler gauge and just check. And if they're too tight, it's more of an issue than if they're too loose. A bit of ticking isn't a major issue. It's just going to create a little bit more wear on the buckets, really. I'd rather the ticking than no ticking at all, because that just means that there's always potential for the valve to be slightly open, so it's just going to have no compression and no power. Neil, I think your camera, the crank sensor would be a good place to start, but I would try the black crank sensor rather than the brown one. Right, let's come on to that. Lots of all the good things, like power. Ultimately, lots of power is going to cause your engine to die sooner. Using lots of power all the time is going to make it die even sooner. Using all the revs, 8.5, 9,000 even, it's going to make it die even sooner. So, if something's good for 400 horsepower, doesn't mean use 400 horsepower all the time. It means that it can take that for limited amounts of time. But everything that's fun is going to eventually wear out. So I wouldn't worry about it. If you're using things like anti-lag for limited amount of time, fine. But if you're sitting at a show with it sat on launch for a couple of minutes showing off to your friends, it's probably not going to be a surprise that it dies. Right, no problem. Are you able to map the gearbox? No, there's some things that you can do mechanically that will speed up the change. I don't know what they are. Customer of mine, Zane, has made those changes, and it's speeded up his gearbox change a lot on his. Have I been to Carnetics at Mountain Lake? God, not for a long time. Yeah, Beck and Glen used to be at TSL. That's going back a long time. No, not been up to Carnetics recently. I'm trying to think when the last time I went up there was. Probably 5 years ago. Yeah, sorry about that. Right, any recommendations on a sports cat for 2006 in WRX? The best ones are still the ProDrive ones. They still work, they still make good power, they still pass MOT. So a second-hand ProDrive sports cat, brilliant. There are other makes available, Cobra, Scorpion, whatever, but I still think the ProDrive one beats all of them. Hands down. Ooh, just on ethanol and 95 octane fuels, is there a certain type of ethanol you need to get? You want to try and get it as pure as possible. You don't want to be introducing other chemicals in there. Methanol from Genichem I've always found to be very reliable, but the who was the God, what's the name of them? Race methanol and race ethanol is by far and away the most consistent, but it depends on what you want to do. If you're using it as a octane booster, then try and get sort of pure ethanol, and that will bring the octane up at the 95 RON fuel and make it sort of close to 99. Right, come to see you in a few weeks. Good. With a fully forged engine, front mount VF400, but concerned about stock blow-off valve holding the boost pressure. In 18 years of mapping Subarus, I've had 2 standard boost solenoid blow-off valves, or standard Subaru dump valves fail. 2. The standard ones don't fail. Aftermarket ones, Bailey's are shit. The springs are far too weak. They're always seizing up. They're sticking. Most of the aftermarket ones, like the HKS, SQV, most of those that are on the market or bought through eBay are fake and tend to either fall apart or leak. I've had so many problems with aftermarket dump valves. The standard one is by far and away the most reliable, or just blank it off completely. Late to the party is the new Daily Driver XT on the dyno tomorrow for a mapping session. Might be. Yeah, it is. Yeah. It's you again with the crappy Irish fuel. Yeah, Stuart. Methanol's probably your easier octane booster to get hold of, because they use it with diesel and whatever you say, like biodiesel. So I'm sure you'll be able to get hold of that over there. Is it worth swapping from a GC 5-6 setup on timing wheels to a new age timing wheel setup? Yes, it is. Doing that on yours, you would need to change the cam and the crank and the cam pulleys. I don't know whether the cam pulleys will fit on the cams and time up correctly, but it would be worth investigating. The crank pulley is much more accurate because you got much more pickups on there rather than the classic one, so it is more accurate and is able to get in sync a lot easier. The Guardian. Hey Duncan, I hope you're well. Yep, I also have a Subaru Exige GT STI tuned version. However, 220 horsepower isn't enough in the 7-seater. No, it isn't, particularly if you've got 7 people in there. Is it worth swapping the turbo out to a VF series type to get 280-ish? Yes, but you don't need to get like a VF 38. I don't. Is the Exige a twin scroll or a single scroll turbo? Maybe if it is a twin scroll, the TD04 off the Legacy GT twin scroll would be a good option, because that's going to definitely get you to around that sort of horsepower. The current turbo probably, it's probably not going to get the 280. Probably around the 255 is where I would say you'll get to. The gearbox should be able to cope with that, no problem. The engine and the gearbox should be fine for around the 280. I wouldn't have had, if it was mine, I wouldn't have any issues about running that sort of power on that setup. Blimey, hi Cave. That's a blast from the past. Is that the same Cave from before? Right, yeah, faster, more torque. Yeah, 7-seaters are heavy. It is a big old bus. Pretty cool, but it's a big old bus. Right, how are we doing? Right, 5 minutes or so left. FXT got new Walbro 255 AM fuel lines along with billet rails and fuel pressure reg. Had to drop fuel pressure down to 2 bar to have no trims. It's still running low 10s on my wideband wide open throttle. Okay, so we'll follow on from that. I think changing the map on that, because obviously you're changing the rails and the fuel lines, it's going to change how much fuel is going through there. So yeah, definitely you need to make some changes to the fuel maps, or the MAF curve, or the injector latencies, or something within the map to actually get it. Once your new engine is fitted and running, what sort of numbers will I get? I don't really do running in. In the last Forester STI, built the 235 for that, warmed it up, ran it around the estate for about a mile, dropped the oil, and then drove it up to the dyno and mounted it. Right, sorry. The end of that. What sort of power? It's going to run the same sort of power because the turbo dictates the power. But I might get the turbo hybrid. Not decided yet. Ideally, I just want to get it back in and running and being nice. Right, got one of those cheap, nasty blow-off valves on my car. Sounds good, must say. If you like the sound, yeah, great, go for it. I don't. I think they sound nice and blanked off completely. Cut a piece of metal the shape of the gasket, obviously without the hole in the middle. Drill the 2 holes in it and put it in there. Between the dump valve and the intercooler, and that will blank it off. You can buy aftermarket ones that are, nice billet bits of metal, but it's I've even blanked them off with just cutting that sort of shape out of an oil can or a plastic oil tub, and making a couple of holes, putting it in, and that blanks it off absolutely fine. That's what I do. If I have a problem with the dump valve on the dyno, that's what I do on the dyno, just to get rid of the problem. Right, good question. Right, if a car has the head gasket failure, do you think the engine should be fully rebuilt? It's just replacing the gaskets. Is the engine on borrowed time? Looking for a car for a family member. Personally, I would say yes. Just from my own experience, if the head gaskets go, generally the bottom end goes shortly afterwards. Could be oil in the water or water in the oil or something, but yeah, it tends to follow shortly afterwards. Sam, do you guys that try and build engines? Yeah, I build them down there. Yeah, I don't go into the full forged builds because for the vast majority of people, 400 horsepower is enough. If you're in a 2 litre, then the standard STI short block will take way more than that. The most I've had is like 650 out of the standard STI short block. It depends what you're after and what sort of power targets and what the use is. If you want to give me a shout and ring me or text me or message me or WhatsApp me or message me on here or whatever, I can chat through what you need. But there is quite a big waiting list at the moment. Right, yeah, okay. It is the same Kaif. Right, blimey. That is years ago, that Mapshaw car. Okay, right. Made, hello Duncan, made in the evening. Right, question. Swapping an EJ207 version 7 engine into a 93 GC8. Have a link, G4X. Already run new edge coils, have front mount. Will the link run the AVCS? Can you start the engine? If you swap the trigger pattern in the link to the new age trigger pattern, then it will start it and run it. Yeah, I'm just trying to think what else you'd need to do in there. Yeah, you just change the trigger pattern and the injectors. It's on an early, it's on a single coil unplug. So yeah, you should be able to just change the trigger pattern in the link and it should fire enough anyway to get it running. Crikey, right, I'm running out of time here, guys. Taking delivery of a lovely TD04 hybrid next week. Current boost target is 1.2 bar with a standard TD04 to keep it safe until mapping. Would you change the boost target lower? Probably not. You're data logging things anyway, Tom, as part of the academy. So data log it, get your deck cams on there, see what it's doing. If you wanted to drop the wastegate duty or drop the maximum wastegate duty down to 0, then it will give you a lower, or give you actuator pressure, but that might still be about a bar anyway, depending on who's built the turbo for you. Right, yeah, it's normal. Yeah, very normal, unfortunately. Right, thanks, James. For the new fuzz, billet blow off valve blank for the new fuzz. Oh, don't tempt me. Right, how are we doing on here? Right, right, okay. Turbo flatter and journal bearing turbos, like VF turbos, that the bearings don't handle the sort of axial loading. The ball bearing turbos are undoubtedly better and stronger. The journal bearing ones, I haven't had a journal bearing turbo fail as a result of blanking off a dump valve. Some of the old turbos, like an old VF 22s and whatever, the blades are quite weak in them and the cores are quite weak. They're quite old. I haven't seen it as an issue. But yeah, if it goes, upgrade. Right, I'm going to have to call it a day. Right, any reason why you don't run it in? If it's built properly, it shouldn't really need running in. What you're doing during the running procedure is, you know, I'm not saying don't do any running procedure, and always go by what your engine builder is telling you, because he's the one that's going to be effectively giving you a warranty. So if he says do 4,000 miles at less than 2,000 RPM, do it. Be the most boring 4,000 miles you ever do, but to get the best performance out of an engine, the rings need to bed into the bores, and to get the rings to bed into the bores, it needs a little bit of boost just to push them out and just to seat them and seal properly. So a bit of boost during running helps the engine make more power in the long run. If you do 2,000 miles at less than 3,000 RPM, there's no boost, there's no load on the engine at all, and all that engine is going to learn to do is to plod along. The bores will be glazed, it will be it might be a nice safe engine, but it won't ever make the power that it should make. By pushing the rings out into the bores, it beds them in properly. The bearings will be running in 20 miles or so. So all you're doing is bedding the rings in. With mine, I started up, ran it around the block, checked for leaks, dropped the oil, changed the oil, put proper oil in it, drove it up to the dyno, mapped it. That car ran, or the target with that was 450. I mapped it up to 400. Went off, did a track day, came back, changed the oil again, obviously, and then mapped it up a bit higher, because the engines kind of release, they kind of relax after about 1500 miles and make more power then. So on a tight engine, it's going to make slightly less power. So I kind of said, okay, I want it to make power ultimately in the long run, but I need to bed it in properly. And for me, you know, I'm not very patient when it comes to running in, and you know, Paul Finch, that used to build the engines for me for the race car, said don't need to really build, or don't really need to run them in. Right. Okay, I'm running out of time here. Right, I'm going to have to call it a day after this. Pros and cons: if I do decap the Forester SCI, I would leave it as it is. Well happy with yesterday's mapping. Pros and cons: it's pain when it comes to MOT. Potentially, if you get pulled over in a roadside emissions check or exhaust check, then they could give you a producer to basically get the cap put on there. You would make slightly more power, you would make more torque. Personally, you know, you made 340 odd, so I think, you know, as I said at the time, I was very annoyed because it made 20 horsepower more than mine with more spec. I would leave it as it is, personally. I think it's an awesome car, beautiful car. Hi Duncan, now second time messaging. Done all your recommendations, wall pumps, SDI intercooler, pink injectors, decat exhaust, performance air filter remapped, a local Plymouth tuner, made 260. Yeah, I don't know what to say on that, Paul. Maybe there was another reason that's holding it back. Could be the up pipe cat is starting to block. It could be lots of different reasons. But if you want to send your power graphs over, I'd have a quick peek, not a problem. Right, I'm going to have to call it a day, guys. So any further questions, pop them in the comments below, and I will get back to every single one of them. And I will see you in the next live stream. Thanks for watching.